Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Democrats have not had a night like last night in a long time. And the message sent to Donald Trump and the Republican Party into the entire political world was loud and clear if anyone cares to listen. These infographics from the New York Times, they've become familiar. They run these often, right? Comparing voting trends from last year's presidential election to last night. And it's a map, right? You see both the states, New Jersey, Virginia, county by county by county. Every blue arrow you see on that map there is an area that voted more for the Democrats than it did just last year. And as you can see, it's basically all blue arrows, like all throughout the state. Because last night, everything shifted towards the Democrats and away from Donald Trump. They swept practically every single race up and down the ballot across the country. The Democratic roll began with an early call in Virginia, where Democrat Abigail Spanberger is winning by 15 points. The last Democrat to win a Virginia gubernatorial election in similar circumstances, Donald Trump was in office at that point, was Ralph Northam, who won back in 2017 by just 9 points. Democrat handily won the lieutenant governor's race there as well. Ghazala Hashmi, the first Muslim woman elected statewide anywhere in the United States, by more than 10 points. In the state attorney general race, this actually, political observers have been watching this one closely, right? Because Democrat Jay Jones managed to edge out a victory, and not really even edge out, like a 5-point win's a 5-point win, in the midst of a text message scandal that was pretty bad. Keep in mind, Harris won Virginia by 6 points, right? So he's almost running even with her after an absolutely brutal campaign. That's the top of the ticket. Further down the ballot, in some senses, an even more amazing result. Democrats picked up 13 seats in the Virginia House of Delegates. 13 seats. In one night, the House of Delegates goes from essentially almost a 50-50 split, narrow majority, to basically a Democratic supermajority. And again, if you do not think any of this was about the guy who's in the White House, the guy who just knocked down the East Wing, Donald Trump, well, here's the Speaker of the Virginia House.
The thing I love about Virginia, we have a motto. It's sic semper tyrannis, thus always the tyrants. We don't like kings in Virginia. And tonight we stood up and we showed them that we would not continue to accept the direction that the country was going. We got to send the first love letter to the rest of the country. You know, Virginia's for lovers. We got to send the first love letter to the country to say we have not all lost our dang on minds and we're ready to move in a different direction.
In New Jersey, Democratic gubernatorial candidate Mikey Sherrill crushed her Trump-endorsed opponent in a race that basically everyone thought was pretty close. Republicans definitely thought that they had a real shot at winning.
Here in New Jersey, we know that this nation has not ever been, nor will it ever be, ruled by kings. We take oaths to a constitution, not a king. We've chosen liberty, the very foundation of democracy, and we've chosen prosperity necessary to create opportunity for all.
And then in New York City, state with a population greater than the city with population greater than 38 states, the left wing of the modern Democratic Party had arguably its biggest victory ever. 34-year-old Democratic socialist Zohran Mamdani won the race to be mayor of New York. Mamdani won an outright majority of the vote, meaning he, even if he was running as one person, right, he's got a majority, in a three-way race in which he was really smeared with attacks on his Ugandan heritage and his Muslim faith and just about everything in between. He defeated Andrew Cuomo, who had been, down the stretch, endorsed by both Donald Trump and Stephen Miller.
New York will remain a city of immigrants, a city built by immigrants, powered by immigrants, and as of tonight, led by an immigrant. So hear me, President Trump, when I say this. To get to any of us, you will have to get through all of us.
Now, those are the three top marquee races, right? Those are the big ones every year. They're the three races that happen every year, 1 year after the presidential. So Virginia governor, New Jersey governor, New York City mayor. But that, honestly, is just the tip of the iceberg, because across the country, it was just a total blowout for Democrats, like a 10 out of 10 kind of night. In California, voters there turned out in droves just so they could support Governor Gavin Newsom's ballot initiative, which would allow the state to redraw its congressional maps in order to combat Republican gerrymandering, particularly in Texas. That measure, which again was on the ballot in a year when California doesn't have elections, they don't have really off-year elections, it was a special election, it won by 30 points. The governor of California thinks he knows why.
Donald Trump is an historic president. He is the most historically unpopular president in modern history. In every critical category, Donald Trump is underwater.
In Pennsylvania, right, a crucial swing state, a swing state that Donald Trump carried a year ago, the state voted to retain all three of its Democratic Supreme Court justices after Republicans, and one particular rich dude, spent millions upon millions of dollars in a normally sleepy race, hoping to be able to get control of that court to possibly muck around with future election results in the state. In bellwether Erie County, one of those counties that election nerds are always looking at, a Democrat ousted an incumbent Republican for a county executive seat. Down south, in deep, deep red Mississippi, Democrats flipped 2 seats in the Mississippi State Senate, where they broke the Republican supermajority there. They also appeared to have flipped a state House seat. 2 Democrats won seats on the Georgia Public Service Commission, which, again, sort of a sleepy office, but that's a statewide election, okay? This is the first time, listen to this, Democrats have won statewide in Georgia in a non-federal race, meaning not Senate races, in almost 20 years. And I could go on and on. We could get super granular. I could take you through county legislative races in New York and counties in Connecticut. But just everywhere you look, when you zoom in, it's not just a normal night, right? And it wasn't just a win for the party that has more engaged voters, because we have seen Democrats overperform in special elections. No, this was something different. These were high turnout elections that delivered an absolute electoral drubbing for Donald Trump, for MAGA, and the Republican Party. Probably the closest analog I can find in the time that I've covered politics, for Democrats at least, is probably 2006, when Democrats had an enormous night and it just became clear to everyone the country was absolutely through with George W. Bush and through with the Iraq War and through with all of it, and then a major electoral backlash was brewing. Or for Republicans back in 2009, 2010, that 2009 night, right? Chris Christie winning, Bob McDonnell winning in Virginia, it said something about where the politics were. And last night says something deep about the politics of the country, because you can look at all the polls all you want, and you can read the reporting, but the voters actually have to vote, right? They get to say, in the end, that's what democracy is. And what they were saying last night is something that a lot of people in the discourse have been weirdly reluctant to come to terms with, but is staring us in the face. This is not super complicated. There's an Occam's razor solution for it. Donald Trump is unpopular. He is disliked. Donald Trump, 1 year ago, winning a single election by 1.5 percentage points, coming out of sky-high inflation, the oldest president in history, a guy who jumped off the ticket 100 days before the election, him winning that 1.5-point victory did not mean that America suddenly became right-wing forever in perpetuity. That we were now and would always be a MAGA nation, that the culture was transformed. It certainly didn't mean that Trump would continue to overperform with, for instance, young men, or overperform with voters of color, particularly Hispanic voters, as he had just a year ago. Because guess what? It's just 12 months later, and let me tell you, last night, his party decidedly did not overperform. Zohran Mamdani won young men by 40 points, according to NBC News exit polling. Spanberger and Sherrill, who are sort of normie, centrist Democratic women, right? They won young men by double digits. Donald Trump won last year. He did. That's democracy. He won narrowly with a very, very razor-thin majority in the House and a small one in the Senate, and immediately has overplayed his hand. We have tangible proof of that today. It's not polling, it's not speculation, it's not vibes. It's the real thing right in front of us. It is the first real possibility of an emperor has no clothes moment. And Republicans can ignore it to their own peril. Joining me now is Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts. According to NBC exit polls in New Jersey, 32% of voters said the economy is the most important issue. 7% said immigration. 16% said healthcare. 35% taxes. Only 3% said crime. That's the sort of top line here. What is your reaction to what happened last night?
Well, woohoo! But it's you've got this right. There's a big pushback against Donald Trump. But look at the other half, and that is the message that the Democrats ran on. What Zoran ran on, what Abigail ran on, what Mikey ran on was affordability, affordability, affordability. They were out there talking about what's happening to American families right now in Donald Trump's economy, how people are smashed against the wall, and they committed that they are in the fight to turn that around, to be part of a state government, to be part of a city that says we're not here just to make government work for a handful of billionaires. We're here to make government work for working people. And a lot of people heard that and said, I'm with you on this.
How much does that message matter over and above the kind of structural backlash, right? Like, how are you thinking about this in terms of, we have this term thermostatic public opinion, right? And we've seen it for all the years that I've covered, particularly that Virginia race, right? Democrat in the White House, Republicans probably favored in that race a year later. Republican in the White House, the Democrats probably favored, right? We kind of know the way this goes. Over and above that, what did you see last night from Democrats that says what's happening is more than just the normal swings of the way the electorate works?
So I see this as how it is that someone like Mikey Sherrill, whom I like very much, but is a very different flavor than Zoran Mamdani, basically both ran on the same message. Stop and think about that for just a minute. Mikey and I were co-sponsors on the bill for universal child care. I went and campaigned with Zoran on universal child care because both of them were saying, we understand what's happening to American families. We understand how life is just not livable in a world that is all about tax breaks for billionaires and not making the investments in our families, in our children, not making investments in transportation or bringing down the cost of utilities. That these were candidates who said, I have very specific plans. I'm going to be in the fight to bring down costs for you. And what that does is that helps us really, as Democrats, get to a place where we deliver. We do things that are measurable. We're not just not Donald Trump, which, believe me, that is enough. That's enough to motivate a lot of people to go to the polls. But it's beyond that. And the point is, it's sustainable over time, Chris. It's how you build something out of New York City and out of Virginia and out of New Jersey. It's how you build something out of all parts of the country to say that we get it. The cost of utilities is up 11% since Donald Trump got into office. Cost of groceries is up. Cost of housing is up. And Republicans are deliberately trying to push the cost of health care. I mean, how do you describe it? Through the stratosphere. People are watching their health insurance rates double and triple. And what I felt last night is this kind of joining together among Democrats in how we're in this fight. I'm here in the Senate where Democrats are holding out, saying that we're not going to sign off to a Republican budget that takes away health care from tens of millions of people. We're in this fight to help get those health care costs under control, to bring them down for working families. And I think that's kind of the heart of what it means to be a Democrat.